So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we gonna see, what if Izuku was Todoroki instead of Midoriya? In the Todoroki household, Enji was training his eldest, Tuya. With the drive to let his own son beat All Might someday, who he couldn't himself, he gave intense training more than Tuya's body could handle. Enji wasn't satisfied at all whenever his son easily drops, resulting to Tuya having siblings. Fuyumi was born. Unfortunately, she is too weak for her father's standards, having Natsuo next with the same judgment. They were neglected easily by Enji, leaving them to their mother's care, and he stuck with Tuya. Until a few years later, Rei Todoroki, Enji's wife, gave birth to twins. Both kids ended up having red and white hair. Shoto, the older twin, half side was red and the other was white. Endeavor was sure that he was a masterpiece. Izuku, his hair was red, slowly going gradient to white at the tips. Endeavor wasn't sure of his quirk, but Izuku landed a soft spot on his father's heart. In the result of Enji slowly making up for the family. 2 years later, Izuku and Shoto are now 3. Enji was waiting for another year. 4 years old is when quirks manifest generally for each individual. While Tuya is undergoing harsh training, Shoto is playing with Fuyumi and Natsuo. Izuku had a fever and was put to sleep by Rei, who's now watching her 3 children running around. Unfortunately for the timing, a group of villains decided to infiltrate the number 2 hero's home with the motives of bringing down the public's trust in heroes. The attempt was successful in the start, but as it ends, the villains were defeated, but they got something precious from the house as some of them escaped. Running, playing tag outside. Fuyumi noticed fire. Fire far from the training room. It can't be their father's. "Mom! There's fire!" she exclaimed. Of course, her mother also noticed that this wasn't the doing of Enji. "Let's go outside, you 3. She pulled her children out the front gates quickly while shouting at Enji's direction about the occurrence. Enji was busy training Tuya to hear her, but he noticed this too. "Check if they're complete and safe out there," he said to Tuya, who was struggling. But Tuya loved his mother and siblings that he's willing to run to them. Outside, you can now see Rei Todoroki trying to get back in the house but is being held back by officers. Emergency came to help, but now stopping them from entering back. "My son is still there!" she cried. "Izuku!" she cried more. Tuya, hearing this, shouted at his father. "Izuku's still in his room!" Endeavor, who's now in his hero costume, is multitasking with controlling the flames the enemy started, attacking the villains, defending himself, and making his way to the sick boy's room. Finishing off some villains and successfully taking out the fire near Izuku's room, Endeavor only entered the room to see no one in the room. He came to the most obvious conclusion that his son was kidnapped. He came out the house, walking with a disappointed face. "Where's Izuku?" Rei asked. No reply from his husband. She felt angry and tears started to stream. "Yen-ji, where's Izuku?" she screamed at him this time. "No." "Izuku?" Shoto asked. Fuyumi patted his head, crying. Soon enough, Natsuo and Shoto cried too as they finally understood. Tuya just stared there wide-eyed. He didn't save him. Tuya's thoughts swirl around the idea. Somehow Enji thought this was his fault. After that incident, it was confirmed that no ash held the DNA of Izuku. The Todorokis requested for a search. It went on until 3 months. To no avail, he was later on announced dead. This incident made the family took a sharp turn to the south even more. After somewhat sobering up until the next year, Fuyumi and Natsuo started acting more mature for their age as they helped their mom out. Shoto would have nightmares, but it got better as the time passed. Endeavor distracts himself in hero work and distanced himself from his family. Lastly, Tuya. He ran away a few days after Izuku was announced dead to them and the public. He simply gave up and knew that the Todoroki family will never improve, and he blamed everything to his dad and obviously hated him for it. He wanted to find Izuku as he believed he's still alive. Another search was held for Tuya a few days after he left. No leads or anything for a long period of time, so he was also announced dead by the government. In the middle of the year, 4-year-old Shoto gained his quirk. As Endeavor suspected, it was indeed a powerful quirk. His right side with the white hair releases ice, allows him to freeze an object, while his left side allows him to release flames. A perfect combination of both his parents' quirks. Soon enough Endeavor started training him. The harsh training he did with Tuya was now repeated at his dubbed youngest son. Rei would protect Shoto from her husband only to end up being beaten up. Now she is slowly becoming unstable, scared of her husband. From the start she knew that Enji only married her because of her family's quirk. To be the mother of his children, his new successor. Looking back, leading her to hate and fear the present and future. In the kitchen, Enji was on patrol as Endeavor. Shoto got a break from his training now looking for his mother, and Fuyumi and Natsuo were as usual, not allowed to see or interact with Shoto. Fearing their father, they couldn't do anything but follow this rule implemented by Enji. Finally found his mother, Shoto was about to walk in the kitchen to greet her and give a hug. But he heard the phone call. The children seem to be more like him. And Shoto, whenever I see that kid's left side, it reminds me of him. It's unbearable. I can't handle it. I can't take care of him anymore, she said in between quiet sobs. Shoto was smart enough to understand what the topic was. Her mom looks more pitiful than what she shows back then. Deciding to comfort her mom after the phone call, he ran to her giving her leg a hug asking, "Mom, what are you saying?" Only to end up being pushed away and a hot temperature of freshly boiled kettle to be thrown at his left side. Shoto screamed in agony. Rei finally came to her senses and hugged her son, saying sorry over and over again. She even tried to use her icy quirk to cool it down. But in the end, it gave a scar. When Endeavor knew of what happened, he was beyond furious. He decided to send Rei to a mental hospital because she hurt his masterpiece. If Shoto was sobbing to his mother that he didn't want to be like his father, and how he hates him, imagine how much that hate rise up 100-fold. The family continued to live in a household as a family of 4. Izuku dead, Tuya dead, Rei in a mental. You think they're still onto us? A guy said, catching his breath in an alleyway. I don't think so, but we got a hero's child and that's enough to pay our debt, right? The companion said as he was carrying the 3-year-old they knocked out. We still have time, come oh dash. In front of them, black mist suddenly appeared. You're late, a misty man said. Kurojiri! We're sorry! We came with a ch dash. The man holding Izuku said, but immediately got cut off. We don't tend to late people. As the deal goes, you'll pay with your life. The man in the suit whom they called Kurojiri took the child and left it in the another alley using his quirk, warping the 2 men at his sensei's location, and readied himself to see another gruesome execution. In an alley somewhere in Muzurifa City, Izuku was warped next to a big garbage bin. Starting to wake up and shuffling to his position, a massive wave of headache came to him when he gained his consciousness. The pain in the back of his head was obviously hit by something hard. But right now, where is he? Who is he? He couldn't do anything else but cry from the pain and confusion he was having. Like luck was by Izuku's side, a woman with green hair passed by the alley and heard his sobs. Inko Midoriya is walking home from her job. Very kind woman, though this kind woman is sad about the death of his husband, Hisashi Midoriya, 2 months ago. She went to find where the sobs were coming from only to see a boy, red and white-haired boy, curling on the ground. She immediately went to the boy. Hey little dear. What are you doing here? Inko asked the pity-looking boy. Izuku backed away a little, debating whether or not he should trust the woman in front of him. It's okay, I'll help you, she said, holding out her hand. The boy complied by taking her hand. Inko, now kneeling on par with the Izuku's height, holding his hand, she asked, What's your name? I don't remember. She put a hand on his forehead only to feel a high temperature. He must have a fever in this chilly night. Hey! I'll bring you to the hospital, okay? Izuku nodded shyly. Inko picked him up and stopped a cab and went to the hospital. On the way there, Izuku fell asleep. He must be exhausted, Inko whispered to herself. She felt Izuku's tiny hands cling to the sleeves of her pink cardigan. Small snores began to fill the air. In the hospital, Inko decided to wait for the child, who's now being tested to see what was wrong with him. He has a fever, he couldn't remember anything. And I found him crying on the streets, said his head hurts. She told the doctor, hoping it would help. Hours later, tests are now done. A serum was given to Izuku, relaxing him to sleep. We found a bump on a critical area on his head, probably got hit too hard. It looks intentional, this probably caused a memory loss. He has amnesia, Mrs. Midoriya. We interviewed him in case he remembered something and nothing. If he can't tell us his identity, he will be put in an orphanage. We estimated his age as 3 years old, the doctor explained. But the system is horrible, she thought. Doctor, what if I adopt him? When will the papers be ready? Inko asked. Well, if you're really sure, then by the time he's ready to leave, the papers should be ready too, even before his leave. Which is next week. Inko nodded, confirming the adoption. He'll be awake by tomorrow, the doctor said as he takes his leave. The next day, Inko came to the hospital to see the 3-year-old redhead. She went to his hospital room. The boy was coloring on a paper, probably given by the hospital. The boy looked at the green-haired woman. Miss! Izuku greeted as he remembered her from last night. 10 years later. Now 14 years old, Izuku Midoriya is in his 3rd year of middle school. Along with his friend Kaken, Izuku grew up to be quite good-looking and popular at Aldera Middle School. Same goes for the loud blonde. Both in different ways. Katsuki was loud, short-tempered, literally explosive, and is crude. The worst part of him is his big ego and lack of respect to the extras around him. While Izuku is quiet, calm, and kind. His sudden small smiles made everyone's heartbeat raise. They say he's a blessing to Aldera Middle School. Bakuga's not the best person, he takes his anger out on others. Izuku would stop or restrain him, which helped a lot because the blonde would only listen to the redhead. Ha! What do you think you're doing extra? Katsuki's voice could be heard from the other end of the hall. Fortunately for the tormented, Izuku was passing by. Oh, Kaken, you're here, he said as he slid his eyes to the poor kid below Katsuki. Kaken, we'll be late for class. Come on, he said, walking towards his classroom. Katsuki followed behind and left the student alone. After minutes of waiting in the classroom, the teacher arrived with papers on his hand. After formal greetings, he started talking. I would give you this career aptitude test, but what's the point? You all wanted to be heroes. He threw the papers in the air and Izuku's classmates started to showcase their quirk, immediately stopped by Katsuki's voice. Teach! Don't lump me and Izuku with these losers! These buncha extras would be lucky enough to be sidekicks of D-listers. The class went fuming and Izuku sighed in disappointment to his friend's antics. Oh yeah, Bakuga's applying to UA. Same as Midoriya, huh? The class started murmuring about how the acceptance rate was low in UA High. But that didn't stop the two friends to want nothing more than be accepted. So 10 months later, the entrance exam finally came. And all Izuku and Katsuki did was train and study. In front of the UA gates, Katsuki and Izuku walked along with other participants. Making their way to the orientation hall, Izuku tripped and braced for the fall. But what's expected didn't come. He was floating in midair? He relaxed himself and saw a brunette girl with pink cheeks. Sorry I used my quirk on you, but it'd be a shame if you fall before the exams, right? She said to the redhead. Izuku turned to her only to see her blush after her confident smile. Thank you, he blurted out with a neutral face. Then I'd better get going, the girl said. Katsuki then pulled Izuku to the orientation room and found their seats. President Mike started orientation with an energetic greeting. Unfortunately, it wasn't returned to him with the same energy. The students were silent, and he just decided to start explaining the exam. In the middle of explaining, a boy with blue hair and glasses raised his hand. President Mike, who was happy that a student decided to participate and talk, called over the number of the participant, giving him permission to speak. The boy stood up and started talking. Sir! In the printout handed out, it shows there are 4 types of villains, not 3 like from your explanations. If this was a mistake on official UA material, then it is shameful, he exclaimed. Well, listener, thank you for pointing it out. I was just about to get to that part actually. The 4th faux villain is a 0-pointer. So it's recommended that you could just run away from it, Mike answered. Then, check your papers and see where your prospective battle centers are. The students looked at their papers. I guess they won't let friends help each other, huh? Bakuga said. Izuku just nodded, not leaving his sight on the stage. Later on, the participants went to their assigned battle center. Izuku got battle center B. He saw the brunette he bumped into earlier, and the glasses boy from the orientation. Everyone was looking at Izuku. His red hair that fades down to white caught many attention. Soon, the gates opened and President Mike screamed, "Go!" where students ran to comply. Izuku uses his cold white flames to freeze the robots, causing them to malfunction, saving others who do not watch their surroundings, causing him to gain more points unknowingly. Meanwhile, at the control room where the staff is, Eraserhead was watching boredly at his potential soon-to-be students. Looking around different screens, he saw one participant who was running across faux villains who already has their targets. But before the faux villains could do anything, it was freezed, stuck down to the ground. But instead of freezing to malfunction, its legs melted into the ground slowly. He recognized the structure of the ice. He saw this at the recommendation exams a few days ago. Nizu, does Shoto Todoroki from the recommendations have a brother? Aizawa asked, the mixed look of bear, mouse, closest to a hamster in my eyes principle. Well, yes, he has. A college student in a medical course, the smart animal answered. No other? The other 2 are dead if I look back from 10 to 11 years ago. The tired-looking man sighed and continued to watch the participants as Nizu pushed a button to release the giant 0-pointer. Here we go again, Aizawa thought. Back at the battle center, the ground rumbled and a big robot, specifically the 0-pointer, rose from the ground. It was bigger than the robots they have been destroying. Somehow it was fearsome, but it's a 0-pointer, they don't need to take the robot down, they don't have to deal with it. Most thought, even the redhead Izuku thought of this. But just before leaving, he saw the kind girl who kept him from falling earlier. She was stuck under a rubble. She couldn't run away from the giant faux villain. Changing his course from running away to running towards the villain, Izuku shot his cold flames towards the stuck girl. Then he shot his red-hot ice glaciers far above her before the villain steps on her. Controlling both temperature, the girl didn't burn because of the cool of his quirk nor freeze from the low temperature. The girl didn't get crushed as the hot glaciers melt the structure of the robot's legs. He saved the brunette by taking her out of the rubble and carried her far enough for the robot not to fall on them both. He used his quirk to warm up his body so that the girl would have her normal body temperature back. Then President Mike called the end of the exams. Recovery Girl started walking towards Izuku and the girl he comfortably sat on the ground. I think she had a sprain, Izuku said to Recovery Girl in a neutral tone. Recovery Girl kissed the forehead of the brunette, and her sprain, and some cuts started to disappear. Back at home, Inko Midoriya was waiting for her son. She knew he'd passed just from watching him train by himself or with Katsuki. As a special treat, she made her katsudon and soba. She couldn't usually make both, mostly because of the time it takes and her job and resting hours. Izuku understood this, but this was special and she decided to take a leave off her work. Izuku came home earning a hug from her mother as he took a step in the house. Hey Ma! He greeted with a small smile forming his face. This smile usually shows whenever Inko's around, or Katsuki would do something pleasing then crude. How was the exam? She asked, helping Izuku out with his stuff. Tiring, he said. Inko knew how Izuku is not a talker, so she doesn't mind short responses. How was the exam? She asked, helping Izuku out with his stuff. Tiring, he said. Inko knew how Izuku is not a talker, so she doesn't mind short responses. All that's left is to wait for the acceptance letter. A week later, the day has finally came. The letter of Yue is supposed to arrive today. Izuku was honestly nervous. Even though it doesn't show, his mom could read his face and actions like a book. It was already the afternoon, and he was internally panicking. In his room, obviously sulking on his bed, Inko could only think of how bad this anxiety of his is. Izuku wasn't the type to dwell on things, but this is not just a simple thing. This is his dream high school, his future. So she was worried. In the living room every now and then, she was taking glances at the door. Soon enough, one glance away and one glance to the door again. An envelope was now on the floor. Izuku! Izuku! She yells as she runs to her son's room with the envelope in her hand. It's here! She waved the envelope. Izuku walked to her mom. She gave him what he's been waiting for and decided to give him privacy. With his patience testing him, he ripped the envelope vigorously only for a small machine-like to fall. Not seconds later, the machine showed a hologram projection of All Might. Congratulations, young Midoriya! Izuku continued to watch the hologram. You passed the entrance exam! Not only that but got the highest score in UA's entrance score history. With the villain points of 81, but that's not the only thing we grade. You received 55 rescue points, which gives you a total of 136 points. It showed the rankings and saw Katsuki second, just below him. Then it went back to All Might again. Congratulations! Welcome to your Hero Academy! Then it stopped. Izuku was so happy. He ran to Inko and hugged her tightly, saying he passed. She was so proud and knew his training was worth it. He called the Bakugas through the landline with Katsuki answering it after the fourth ring. Oi, nerd! Kaken! You passed! You scored 105 points, the redhead said. Yeah. Congrats on placing first, the blonde said. Which made Izuku smile fully because Kaken acknowledged him. Even though he knows that Katsuki acknowledges him, even from the start, the blonde doesn't really say anything. Finally, the first day of UA. In the Todoroki household. Shoto woke up early like he usually does. Got ready, then changed to his uniform. He heard Fuyumi call her from the kitchen. Complying to her calls, he went there and said a quiet good morning. Fuyumi is now 22 years old and helps his brothers like a mom. She cooked pork cutlet bowls for breakfast. Natsuo already ate and left. Make sure to finish okay, she said as she was taking her leave to get ready for work. Natsuo is 19 and in college, leaving Shoto to be 16 along with his long-gone twin. Shoto was done eating and Fuyumi is ready to leave. Don't forget to pray for them, okay? She said as she was leaving the door. Shoto nodded and put his plates to the sink, then went to a room. In the room, nothing else but showcased two batsudans with open doors. Fuyumi probably opened this, he thought, looking at the pictures inside of them. He lit the candles again as it was dead. He bowed down and paid his respects. One picture showed a kid with red and growing white hair. The other one showed a dark hair fading down to white, no more than 3 years old. The picture was monochromatic. He knew this was his twin. He remembered being close to Izuku but not the same as Tuya. Every day, like a habit, the Todoroki family would visit and pay their respects. Rei still hasn't gone home from the mental. Still keeping her hatred, anxiety, and sadness. She keeps on remembering the abuse and the death of her children. Fuyumi and Natsuo would visit, but Shoto still doubts himself and thinks his mother hates him. In the Todoroki household, Shoto went home from his first day at UA. Surprisingly, his father was there. Tension started to fill the house's ambience. Shoto. How was school? Enji asked with the hope of his son replying. There are times this happens. Enji would try to act like good father to make up for his losses, but his kids doesn't really comply. All of them felt like they were just created because Endeavor wanted to beat All Might. Fuyumi forgave Enji, but distance was still kept. Natsuo was mad. He is especially close to Tuya. He blamed their father for his loss. Shoto simply rebelled against him by not using his left side, or his flames. Surprising Enji, Shoto replied. Met someone interesting. Then he took his leave to his room, or so his father thought. Leaving Enji there, he thought to himself. Someone interesting? Shoto went straight to the room with the Batsudans and looked at his twin's picture. Showing similarities, but he wasn't really sure. He's not the best at these things. Shoto, just like Izuku, is dense. Natsuo, his older brother who is home, came in the room to pay his respects. He woke up late earlier morning. Shoto? You woke up late too? He asked his younger brother. Shoto shook his head no. Not really, then what are you doing here? I met someone who looks like Izuku. From his two-colored hair to his two-colored eyes. Shoto said in a serious tone. Shoto. Izuku's dead. Natsuo said with furrowed brows and his pained expression. The body wasn't found, he raged. We searched our old city and its neighboring cities. Natsuo fought back. Enji, hearing their screams, went to the Batsudans. What's happening here? He asked in a stern voice, causing both boys to stop arguing. Natsuo, who was mad at Enji, left immediately, and Shoto just stayed there looking pissed. Shoto. We already tried looking for them, Enji said to his son. Shoto huffed, then bowed to the Batsudans before leaving. Enji sighed. He looked at the two pictures in the Batsudans. He made a painful expression as he saw the smiling faces of his dead sons. He closed the door to the room and left quietly, deciding to go to work so he could escape his sadness. Weeks passed and classes were all training and lectures. Looking at the schedule, Aizawa saw that it is time to go to the USJ. Okay class, tomorrow we will be going somewhere for class, he said in his dull voice. Now it's time to do something that will probably affect your whole school year. Everyone tensed up. What could it possibly be that it will affect that much time? Since we have this field trip tomorrow, you will be picking class representatives. It's normal, the whole class exclaimed in their thoughts. These students keep forgetting that UA is still a high school. I don't care how you do it, just pick one before class ends, Aizawa said, zipping himself in his sleeping bag and faced the wall. Okay, we should vote class president and vice president, Ida said, chopping the air with his arms. Most of them wanted to vote for themselves, volunteering themselves. Izuku couldn't care less. How about this? Write the name of who you want to vote in a piece of paper and we'll count the results, Ida suggested. Then wouldn't that just means all of us would vote for ourselves? Denki asked. Which is why you can't write your own names, OT vote for yourself. In the end, Momo Yayorozu became the president, and Ida became vice president. The next day, Ida and Momo lined the class up to the bus. But they seemed to fail and just hive up on forcing the arrangements. In the end, Class 1A is with their group of friends. Finally making it to their destination, the class went out the bus to be met by Pro Hero 13. It's 13! Uraraka exclaimed as she was a big fan. So this are your students, Aizawa-senpai? 13 said. Surprised no one's expelled yet. Aizawa hummed at his coworker's comment. You like your class this year, huh? Aizawa just gave him a seriously look. 13 laughed before setting the attention to the students. Follow me inside the building. Once inside, the students were amazed at the big dome that reminded them of Universal Studios Japan. This is where you would be practicing on saving people in natural disasters. You can see that we built different situations where you can practice. This is the Unforeseen Stimulation Joint. Or to call it shortly, the USJ. It really is the USJ, the class exclaimed. Now 13 is explaining her quirk and her line of hero work. 13 doesn't usually fight villains, 13 does more rescue work. Izuku, who had been paying attention, suddenly caught Mist appearing. Then he heard Kirishima talk. Wow! They have fake villains too! That's not fake villains, Izuku said out. He's right, everyone out. Those are real villains, 13 said. 13! Protect the students while I fight. But Eraserhead! There's so many! Izuku yelled. Eraserhead was taken aback that the kid knew who he was when he didn't even reveal anything but his scarf. But there are more important things right now. You can't be a hero with only one trick, he yelled as he charged at the low-tier villains. A man with blue hair was talking about something, a plan on killing All Might. The motives of killing All Might. All Might should be here. Where is he? He screamed as he scratched his neck, more of irritation. 13 was leading the students to leave the facility but was stopped by the missed man. The same one from 10 to 11 years ago. Kurogiri. Kurogiri blocked the students' way and warped them in different places after the failed attempts of attacks was shot towards him. Izuku was dropped off at the water area with Tsuyu, Ajiri, and Mineta. He would have easily just used his hot ice quirk to make a slide or a bridge from the boat to the shore, but he can't leave his classmates alone. Izuku can't totally control the heat of his ice quirk. He can't fully suppress the hotness to the extent where he wouldn't give them burns. He started planning on things with difficulty. What do I do? Izuku thought. Wait, they don't know our quirks? He suddenly blurted out. What do you mean, Midoriya, Karo? Ajiri asked, and Mineta is panicking in a corner. Your quirk works best in wet places, right? Ajiri nodded at Izuku. And they brought you here. The idea seemed to hit Ajiri. Mineta, we might have the upper hand here, she said to the purple head. It calmed down Mineta a little bit. Izuku think for more seconds. Snowstorm. Izuku thought. Ajiri, Mineta. I want you to survive snow. Is that all right? Karo, I'm not good with snow, Midoriya. I think I can. Mineta said. Izuku sighed. Think more for a few seconds, then he shot a blizzard of ice around and near them, causing the villains that surround them whine at the heat. Even his two classmates. You two might have a fever after this, Izuku said. I'll let a strong snowstorm lead us to the shore. Mineta, stick to me using your balls, and Ajiri, wrap your tongue around my leg or waist so we stick to each other. Or Mineta, use your balls to stick Ajiri to me too. Ajiri, I need you to jump to give us boost in the air, it would be easier. I shot hot ice around so your temperature are controlled. Either way they got out of there. Izuku started his cold flames, resulting to a snowstorm-like form. It was so big and strong that not only the water area felt the cold. Was that Midoriya? Or Todoroki? Mina asked as she was with some of their classmates near the exits already. Then Todoroki walked towards them. Then, it's Midoriya! They exclaimed. Todoroki tilted his head at what they were talking about, then felt a little cold more than his limits. He looked at where the wind is coming from. Now, everybody is staring at the snowstorm Izuku has created. Aizawa AMD, the villain, stopped and stared a second or two, but Aizawa continued to fight, wasting no time. Now at the shore, Izuku, Ajiri, and Mineta took a breath. Izuku, who was exhausted, is at the brink of fainting. Ajiri felt feverish. Mineta was shaking from the cold. Aizawa is now barely surviving with a broken elbow and a nomu. Todoroki and Bakugo, along with Kirishima, ran to where Aizawa is. They noticed their teacher, but Aizawa fended them off. A gush of wind suddenly whirled around. The door opened, revealing All Might and more pro-heroes. Rushing to the center, All Might gave orders to the 3 students present. Take young Midoriya and the other 2 out of here. I have a villain to finish off. The 3 comply. Izuku, who fully went unconscious, is carried by Bakugo, and Ajiri was carried by Kirishima, then leaves Mineta to Todoroki, who warmed Mineta up to stop the shivering. He then exchanged with Kirishima, then warmed Ajiri. The day was saved in the end. Izuku and Aizawa was put to a stretcher and got sent to the hospital. Since Nizu announced their classes done and a week break to let them rest and upgrade security, Katsuki decided to stay with Izuku in the hospital while his auntie Inko is being called. The next day, Izuku jolted awake panting. This caught Katsuki and Inko's attention. Izuku! Are you okay? Inko asked. Suddenly a flash of scenery came to Izuku. He tripped and a woman with white long hair ran to him and asked, Izuku! Are you okay? What? He blurted out. Are you okay? Inko repeated. With a soft, confused face, Izuku nodded. Then he earned a hug. He smiled at his mother's actions. Glad you're okay, nerd. I'll call the doctor, Auntie, Katsuki said as he take his leave. A few minutes later, the doctor went in. How are the others? Was Izuku's first concern. The doctor chuckled at the heroic boy. They're fine, nothing more than bruise and scratches. Aizawa and 13 though have their own rooms until recovery girl is available. How are you, Izuku? I'm fine, he answered. I remember you're that amnesia patient, right? We weren't sure if it was permanent or not. Are you willing to do some tests? Before Izuku could talk, Inko agreed. Then I'll schedule you later or tomorrow. You only fainted from exhaustion and overuse of quirk. You didn't control your temperature, which pushed yourself to a limit. You'll be fine with a few days rest recommended. Izuku nodded. Inko thanked the doctor. Midoriya-san, can we talk outside? Inko complied by following the doctor. Midoriya-san, have you told him yet? Inko shook her head no. The doctor sighed. So you don't plan on telling? Is this why you want to do tests on his amnesia? Inko nodded. If his memories as a child came back, then he'll find his real family. When I'm gone, someone will take him in. The sad conversation continued. Inko-san. He is a lucky boy to have Neem found by you. The next day, Shoto decided to visit Izuku. He doesn't know why, but he has the urge to. When he arrived at the floor, he saw Katsuki leaving. Oh, icy hot, the blonde called. Oh. Bakugo, he said. Is Midoriya awake? Shoto asks. You would have to wait, he's being tested for his amnesia. Bakugo said, grumbling. He has amnesia? He didn't get it from the USJ attack, so you could calm your mind off. How did he get his name? Grr! Ask him those type of questions. How am I supposed to know? Katsuki yelled, only to be stopped by a nurse. Shoto sighed and made his way to the receptionist of the floor, and Katsuki went in the elevator. Izuku Midoriya, he said. The nurse gave him the room number, and he sat on the near chairs to wait. Meanwhile, with Izuku, he jolted awake again as he dreams of sceneries. To be exact, memories. This is the 4th time. He would be put to sleep for minutes, 5 or less, only to be jolted awake by vague flashbacks. Soon enough the doctors concluded that he is slowly regaining his memories, maybe even pop at all at once in his head. Inko-san, he's starting to remember. Inko was relieved at what she heard. Izuku would remember his family. She walked to Izuku's room as Izuku was being shot with calm sleeping serum. In the chairs next to the Izuku's hospital room door was a sitting Shoto Todoroki. Excuse me. She caught the boy's attention. Are you here for Izuku? The boy nodded. Inko looked at Shoto closely. The eyes, the hair color, the face shape, his ambience are same as Izuku. Shoto bowed. You must be Mrs. Midoriya. I'm Shoto Todoroki, Izuku's classmate. Hello, Shoto. Izuku would be asleep for a while. Are you willing to wait? She asked. Shoto just nodded. At least more time away from that old man, Shoto thought. Inko invited the boy to Izuku's room. Soon enough, nurses came in with a sleeping Izuku on a stretcher. He was carried to the bed and left there to sleep, returning to the privacy. Shoto. The boy looked at Inko. Actually, I'm dying. This surprised Shoto. Mrs. Midoriya looked so healthy, no signs of fatigue and sickness. Izuku would be alone. I adopted him with the hopes of growing old, and watch him be a pro hero. Unfortunately, the world is cruel. What are trying to say, Mrs. Midoriya? His memories from amnesia will come back, when he finds his real family. I want to make a request to you. If you don't mind? What is it? I'll do my best, Mrs. Midoriya, Shoto said with a barely noticeable hint of determination in his face. Inko took notice of this. You sure are determined. Shoto tilted his head. You are like Izuku. The way you show expressions are barely seen. But I can read him like a book. Mrs. Midoriya, where did his name came from? Sho. Well, when I found Izuku, it was just months after my husband died. After adopting him, I named Izuku what my husband wanted to name our child. Shoto hummed in response. Soon after, Izuku started to shuffle in his sleep. Then tears started to form. Izuku! Izuku! Inko called to wake him up. The boy jolted awake for the many times this day. Is it that bad dream again? She asked. Izuku just nodded at her. Oh. Your friend is here. Izuku looked at where his mother pointed. Todoroki-kun? Hello, Midoriya, he said in monotone voice. Hello, Izuku returned with a smile. Somehow, Izuku looked different in Todoroki's eyes. Instead of a strong classmate, like he had seen in the USJ and at school, he was a little boy who longed for something. But content is still visible in his eyes. He must have loved Inko-san. Shoto thought. How is he gonna cope with her passing? For now, Shoto let the idea drop out of his head and just wait for the time Izuku needs comfort. He took his leave for now. He didn't want to take much up of Inko's time with his adoptive son. He waved them goodbye and both mother and son thanked him for coming. Shoto, now on the way out of the hospital, saw his sister. Fuyumi. Fuyumi? What are you doing here? He asked. Shoto, I'm here to see Mom. Wanna come with? She asked. Shoto shook his head no as his brows are furrowed. I thought Mom is in the mental, he asked. Well, yeah, the mental building is behind Building B of this hospital. Oh. Okay. How about you, what are you doing here? Fuyumi asked curiously. Someone interesting from class got hospitalized. Shoto said blandly. Is it a girl? She asked, teasing her little brother. No. Another answer with a bland voice. Geez, Shoto, you're no fun. She pouted at his aloof brother. If there's nothing else, then I'm going. With Shoto's statement of leave, Fuyumi felt heartbreak. She couldn't take this coldness between all of them. As she watched Shoto exit the hospital, her thoughts couldn't ignore the want to be with Tuya. The week break passed and students are to attend school. Midoriya didn't need to spend long wait in the hospital bed. He was discharged the day after Todoroki visited him. Well, Aizawa forced his way out of the hospital and his co-workers just gave up on him. Even Nizu. In the Midoriya apartment, coughs can be heard from the kitchen. Mom, are you okay? Izuku asks as he noticed the roughness of his mother's throat. Drink water, okay? Maybe it's dry throat, he said as he put his shoes on. Okay, dear. Good luck at school. She waved bye to her son from the kitchen. Love you, Mom. Love you too. Izuku happily walked to UA. The classroom was noisy and chaotic as usual when he entered. Then just behind him, a gruffy voice spoke behind him. How are you, Midoriya? Izuku looked back with a bit of stunned face, but relaxes no more than a second. How could he not? His sensei is still covered in bandages looking like a mummy. I am okay, sensei, he said. How about you, sensei? Well, it's better here than the hospital, Aizawa said as they both walk in. Sensei! The class shrieked. Sensei! Should you really be working right now? Aizawa sighed. He thinks it's better here than the hospital. Izuku answered for Aizawa. The dull teacher was secretly grateful for that. Go to your seats. In the next 2 weeks, the UA Sports Festival will be held, their teacher said. Aizawa-sensei, is it really okay for the sports festival to continue? The UA Sports Festival is an important event on par with the Olympics. We can't just cancel it. Plus, we'll just be giving what the villains want by doing that. The class nodded as they understood. In these 2 weeks, I want you all to train. Since I'm too disabled to do actual lessons, Ectoplasm will take over in training you with his clones. Good luck! Ectoplasm came in. Okay, 1A, let's go outside. The class went to the changing room, then went to where Ectoplasm is. Well, you have the whole hour to yourself with my clones, call me if they die out. I'll try to attend to you whenever I can, Ectoplasm said as he created his clones.